what will be the unit digit of the squares of the following numbers? We have some numbers here, and in each of these cases you have to tell that if you find out their squares, then what will be at the unit place of those squares. So this question will be a piece of cake for you if you remember the properties of square numbers that we have already discussed in a detailed way, in a very detailed way. But still, let's quickly revise what we have discussed. So we know that if our number ends with 0, that is, it has 0 at its unit place, and if you try to find out the square of this number, then it will have 0 at its units place. It will end with 0. If your number ends with 1 or ends with 9, that is, if they have 1 or 9 at the units places, then if you find the square, then the squares of these numbers will have 1 at its units place. If your number ends with 2 or number ends with 8, and if you find out the squares of these two numbers, then the squares of these two numbers will have 4 at its units place. If your number ends with 3 or ends with 7, and if you find out the square of these numbers, then the square of these numbers will end with 9. If your number ends with 4 or your number ends with 6, and if you find out the squares of these numbers, then the squares of these numbers will end with 6. If your number ends with 5 and you find out the square of this number, then the square of this number will have 5 at its units place. Okay, now look for this one, A, that's 81. So 81 has 1 at its units place, that is this one. If you take the square of this number, then this number, the square of this number will have 1 at its units place, right? This is B, that is 272. So it has 2 at its units place, that is this criteria. That is, if it has 2 at its units place, it will end with 4. The square of this number will end with 4. Then you have C, this is 799, 9 at its units place, this one. So the square of this number ends with 1. Then you have D, that is 3853. It has 3 at its units place, that is this one. You find the square of this one and the square ends with 9. Then you have E, that is 1234, 4 at its units place, this one, and therefore the square of this number ends with 6. F is 26,387, 7 at its units place, that is this one. So the square of this number ends with 9. G is 52,698, 8 at its units place, that is this one. Therefore finding square will give a square number that will have 4 at its units place. This is H, 99,880, 0 at its units place, that is this one. So if you take the square of this one, it will have 0 at its units place. Then you have 12,796, 6 at its units place, this one. Taking a square will give you a square number that will have 6 at its units place. Then the last one is 55,555, 5 at its units place, this one. Therefore taking square of this number will give a square, taking square of this number will give a square number that will have 5 at its units place.